When love descended into hell. What happened in the hours when heaven went silent? The cross had fallen still. The crowd was gone. The world held its breath between death and dawn. But beneath the earth, something was moving. Hell laughed too early. Darkness thought it had won. Yet in that silence, the greatest rescue in eternity had already begun. The Son of God was stepping into the shadows, not as a victim, but as a conqueror cloaked in love. No one on earth saw it, but all of creation would feel it, because before light returned to the tomb, love had already descended into the depths. Part 1. The Descent. Love steps into darkness. When Jesus breathed his last, the world changed in a single heartbeat. The veil in the temple tore from top to bottom. The earth groaned, and graves split open as if creation itself could no longer contain the tension between death and glory. To those watching, it looked like the end of hope, but heaven saw it as the beginning of liberation. His body lay still in the tomb, bound in linen and silence, but his spirit was on the move. The Son of God stepped beyond the final breath, crossing the unseen veil that separates life from the world of shadows. He descended into what Scripture calls the heart of the earth. And for the first time since the fall, light walked willingly into darkness. Hades was not chaos, but order without compassion, a divided realm between comfort and torment. On one side were the souls of the wicked, weighed down by rebellion and regret. On the other, the faithful waited in a patient ache. Abraham, Moses, David, Ruth, all who had believed but had not yet seen the promise fulfilled. They were waiting for a name they had spoken in prophecy, sung about in psalms, and longed for through centuries of silence. And now that name stood among them. No trumpet announced his arrival. No angelic army marched before him. Just the quiet footsteps of love entering the kingdom of loss. The light that once commanded galaxies now flickered softly through the corridors of death. Each shadow recoiled. The air itself trembled as holiness invaded what had been unholy for so long. Hell had never known fear until that moment. The ruler of the dead, who once claimed authority through the curse, sensed a presence he could not comprehend. This was not a soul dragged by sin. It was the Creator who had come voluntarily. Every demonic throne shook, not because of violence, but because perfect obedience had arrived to settle every debt. Justice was no longer distant. It was walking among the lost. The descent of Jesus was not a fall, it was a mission. He was not there to suffer again, but to declare victory. The cross had paid the price. Now he came to collect what was rightfully his, the keys of death and the grave. Every law that had condemned mankind was now being fulfilled, line by line, by the one who had written it. Love was rewriting the story of eternity from the inside out. Imagine the silence as the Prince of Life entered the halls of death. The righteous lifted their eyes. The damned stopped their mocking. And in the space between despair and deliverance, a whisper echoed through the abyss. Not of fear, but of recognition. The Creator had entered creation's end. He came not to argue with darkness, but to unmake it. Not to demand power, but to reveal it through humility. The same love that knelt to wash feet now stooped to rescue souls from the depths. Every step he took disarmed another lie. Every breath unbound another chain. Heaven's victory was unfolding in slow, sacred motion. As Jesus stood in that realm, the ancient promise found its fulfillment. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Hell's gates, once proud and unyielding, began to crack, not because of force, but because glory had entered where it was never meant to go. This is the mystery of the descent. Love went where sin had built its strongest walls, and grace passed through them as if they were air. The Lamb of God, slain yet sovereign, turned death's throne into a doorway. And though no human eye could see it, eternity would never be the same again. Part 2, the silence before the storm. The world had gone still. The cross was empty, the crowd scattered, and the echoes of "it is finished" faded into a heavy silence that covered Jerusalem like a shroud. For the first time since creation, the voice that spoke galaxies into being was quiet. Heaven waited, not in fear, but in reverence. Angels who once cried, "Holy, holy, holy," now stood in perfect stillness, watching what they could not yet comprehend. The throne of God was not empty, it was observing. Every realm, heaven, earth, and Hades, held its breath. To the disciples, the silence was unbearable. They had seen the miracles, heard the promises, and yet all seemed lost. They hid behind locked doors. Their faith cracked under the weight of confusion. What they did not know was that the stillness they feared was the stage of God's greatest movement. Heaven's silence is never absence. It is the prelude to power. In the unseen realm, hell rejoiced. The adversary's laughter echoed through the corridors of the abyss, confident that heaven's champion had been crushed. Demons whispered of victory. The air was thick with arrogance. Yet somewhere deep within that realm, the laughter began to falter. Something shifted. A vibration not of noise but of presence. The same pulse that stirred the oceans and awakened the dawn was stirring beneath their feet. Jesus stood within the shadows, not as a captive, but as a king in disguise. The silence around him was not weakness. It was waiting. Every prophecy, every promise from Genesis to Isaiah hung suspended in time, ready to be fulfilled. The Lamb who had been slain was now standing in the center of death's domain, surrounded by the remnants of rebellion. He spoke no word, yet every corner of Hades knew the rightful owner had arrived. Above ground, grief blinded faith. Mary wept outside the tomb, not realizing that resurrection was already in motion. Peter sat in shame, unaware that his failure would soon become the foundation of grace. The silence they endured was sacred, not empty. It was the sound of mercy gathering strength. God's quiet is never void. It hums with purpose. The pause between crucifixion and resurrection was the womb of redemption, a stillness pregnant with divine reversal. It was the holy interval where justice bowed to love, where the curse began to unravel thread by thread. In that unseen moment, the authority of death began to weaken. Its gates, forged from fear and rebellion, started to crack from within. The one who had been silent was about to speak again, not from a pulpit, but from eternity itself. And when he spoke, every lie would break, every shadow would scatter, and every soul bound by despair would hear the same truth whispered through the ages. Even here, love reigns. The silence before the storm was not a pause in the story. It was the heartbeat of heaven, gathering its strength for resurrection. And in that silence, hell began to tremble. Because even when heaven says nothing, it is never doing nothing. Part 3, the confrontation. When light entered hell, darkness had never known fear until light entered its domain. The silence that had stretched through the depths began to tremble as something ancient and holy moved through the shadows. Hell, built upon pride and rebellion, had always been loud, a place of accusation and arrogance. But now the noise faded. Every whisper, every taunt, every scream dissolved into uneasy quiet. Because the one they thought defeated was walking among them. Jesus did not come as a captive dragged into chains. He came as a king carrying the scent of victory. His wounds still bore the memory of the cross, yet they glowed with a light that pierced through despair. Every scar testified, The price has been paid, the curse undone. The very ground of Hades seemed to bow beneath his steps. The fallen powers gathered, shadows curling at the edges of his light. Their confidence faltered as recognition dawned. This was the Word who spoke their existence into being. They had seen him once before, seated in glory. Now they faced him in the one place they thought he would never go. But love goes everywhere it is needed, even to hell itself. The clash was not of swords or sound, but of presence. Darkness recoiled from holiness, the way frost retreats before dawn. Jesus did not shout, he simply stood. And in that stillness, everything unholy began to unravel. The authority of death was being undone, not by violence, but by truth. He looked upon the imprisoned souls, the righteous who had waited in faith. Abraham lifted his head. David, who had sung of deliverance, saw the deliverer. Isaiah's prophecies burned bright with meaning. All the waiting centuries of faith and tears converged in this one moment of radiance. Then, turning toward the throne of deception, the Son of God spoke. His words were not thunder, they were law. You have held them long enough. The ransom is paid. And the kingdom of darkness trembled. The walls of Sheol cracked under the weight of that decree. Chains melted, gates shuddered. Every demon felt the authority of the one who carried both the wounds of the lamb and the power of the lion. The enemy tried to speak, to argue, to claim, to justify, but no accusation could stand against blood that speaks better things than vengeance. The very weapon used to destroy him had become his triumph. The cross, once a symbol of shame, now stood as the banner of victory. As light poured through the abyss, souls began to rise. The faithful, who had long waited for redemption, felt the warmth of eternity touch their faces. They were not forgotten. They were not forsaken. The shepherd had come for his sheep, even into the valley of death. The confrontation was not a battle of equals. It was a coronation. Death had met its master. The grave bowed to grace. The darkness that had mocked humanity's fall now bowed before the glory of redemption. And in that holy moment, Jesus took the keys of death and Hades into his hands. Hell had no defense left. Its gates, forged from rebellion, were never meant to withstand humility. Its ruler, built on pride, could not comprehend love. And so, with a single act of obedience, the entire kingdom of despair collapsed. As he turned to lead the captives free, one truth rang through eternity. Hell was not conquered by force, but by love that refused to quit. What sin had destroyed, grace rebuilt. What death had claimed, life reclaimed. And as the light of his glory swept across that realm, every echo of fear faded into worship. The storm had begun. The silence was over. Light had entered hell, and darkness would never recover. Part 4. The Liberation, the Keys of Death and Hades. The roar of victory did not sound like thunder. It sounded like chains breaking. The air of Hades, once thick with despair, now shimmered with a trembling light. The one who had entered silently now stood as the center of a cosmic revolution. Every spirit, righteous and lost alike, felt it. The shift of authority, the end of captivity. Jesus stood upon the threshold of death's dominion. Around him, the remnants of rebellion lay powerless. The gates of Hades, symbols of eternal separation, began to fracture under his presence. No sword was drawn, no angel struck. It was not war that broke hell open. It was holiness. The same hands that had been pierced by nails were now stretched toward the locked doors of eternity, and with a word they opened. The kingdom of death had always claimed permanence. No one entered and returned, but the king had entered willingly and was now walking out, not alone. He was not stealing souls. He was releasing them lawfully, for the debt had been paid in full. The ransom was not rebellion, it was righteousness. Every soul once bound by fear now felt peace surge through the corridors of eternity. The prophets had spoken of this day. Isaiah had seen the shadow of it. He will swallow up death forever. Hosea had echoed the triumph. O death, where are your plagues? O grave, where is your destruction? And now those ancient words burned with fulfillment. The grave was not broken from the outside, it was undone from within. Satan, once called the ruler of this world, stood silent. Every boast collapsed beneath the weight of truth. He had wielded death as a weapon, but now it slipped from his hands. For death cannot hold the author of life. The keys that once symbolized power now belong to another. Christ took them, not as a thief, but as the rightful heir reclaiming what was his from the beginning. He turned, holding those keys, the authority of final judgment, the end of fear. Every click of metal against his palm sounded like freedom. The very gates that had mocked humanity were now opened by grace. The captives, the righteous who had believed in the promise, rose to their feet, clothed in light. Their eyes met his, and they understood. The waiting was over. The Lamb had become their liberator. Imagine the sight, a procession of light rising through the corridors of the underworld, the faithful following their shepherd through the valley of shadows into dawn. From Adam to Abel, from Abraham to John the Baptist, the generations of faith now walked behind the one who had defeated death itself. Each step echoed a single truth. The curse was undone. And yet this victory was not shouted from heaven's battlements. It was whispered in the depths of darkness. Because real power doesn't need noise. It needs authority. And Jesus carried all of it. He turned back one final time, looking upon the realm that had held humanity in fear. There was no anger in his eyes, only finality. Hell would still exist as a warning, but never again as a prison for the faithful. What had been a tomb became a passage. What had been an end became a beginning. When he ascended from that realm, he carried more than keys. He carried victory itself. The universe shifted. The curse cracked. The ancient serpent's head was crushed not by force, but by mercy fulfilled. And as the Son of Man rose from the heart of the earth, the entire creation felt its chains loosen. Heaven opened its gates. The redeemed followed, their joy blending with angelic song. For the first time since Eden, the way back to the Father was clear again. Love had not only descended into hell, it had dismantled it from the inside. The liberation was complete. Death had lost its sting. The grave had lost its claim. And in the hands of Christ hung the proof of eternity's greatest truth, that no prison can keep what love has already purchased. Part 5. The Rising, from the depths to glory. The earth was still wrapped in night when it happened. A faint tremor rippled through the ground. Not the violence of destruction, but the pulse of returning life. What began as silence beneath the soil became a heartbeat that echoed through creation. The king was rising. From the depths of the underworld, the procession of light moved upward. The gates of Hades stood open behind them, their power dissolved by love. The righteous, once captives of time, followed their Redeemer through the path he had carved between death and dawn. Each soul that rose carried the reflection of his victory, the unbreakable light of grace. Above them, the tomb lay still in the garden. The guards slept in uneasy silence. The stone, heavy, immovable, final, waited for a command older than creation. Then the earth trembled once more. A blinding light, not of the sun but of eternity, burst forth. The seal of death shattered, and the stone rolled aside like dust before the wind. Heaven erupted in joy. The one who had gone lower than any man was now lifted higher than any name. Jesus Christ, the firstborn from the dead, stepped out of the grave not as a survivor, but as a sovereign. His wounds still glowed, but now as crowns. Each mark that once symbolized pain now radiated authority. Love had done what power alone never could. It had defeated death from the inside out. For 3 days, hell had claimed dominion. For eternity, heaven would sing redemption. When Christ rose, he didn't simply return. He transformed everything beneath and above. Graves broke open. Matthew wrote it simply, but heaven saw it thunderously. Many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. The first fruits of resurrection marched in witness to the world that the curse was broken. Imagine the sight. Dawn breaking, light flooding the tomb, angels standing guard like silent fire. The ground that once drank his blood now glowed with resurrection glory. Creation itself seemed to exhale. The garden, once marked by sin's beginning, now witnessed redemption's completion. Mary Magdalene arrived in tears, expecting to tend to death, but meeting life instead. Her name, spoken once by the risen Lord, pierced centuries of grief. Mary, she turned and everything changed. In one word, love rewrote the human story. The same voice that had called Lazarus from the tomb now called her from despair. This was not merely the return of a man, it was the restoration of mankind. Jesus rose, carrying the weight of every promise fulfilled. Adam's failure was reversed. Abraham's faith was vindicated. David's songs found their final verse. And every cry for mercy throughout history found its answer in the empty tomb. The resurrection was not just victory over death, it was the coronation of love. The same feet that had walked dusty roads now stood on eternity's threshold. The same hands that had healed the blind now held the keys of every destiny. And when he looked toward heaven, it was not as one returning from defeat, but as one who had conquered through compassion. From the depths to the highest heights, the story was complete. What began in a manger ended in majesty. The one who had descended to the lowest place now filled all things. Every realm, heaven, earth, and below, confessed Jesus Christ is Lord. And as the sun rose over Jerusalem, its light fell on an empty tomb, the greatest evidence that love had truly descended and love had truly won. No story in history descends as deep or rises as high as this one. Love went where no light had ever gone, and from that place it turned the grave into a doorway. Death was not destroyed by force, but by surrender. Hell was not silenced by wrath, but by mercy that refused to retreat. Jesus didn't descend to prove his power. He went to prove his love. He entered the very place humanity feared most and came out holding the keys. He walked into the heart of death so that we would never face it alone again. Every chain he broke in that unseen realm still echoes in the hearts of those who call his name. When you stand at the edge of despair, remember this: the same love that descended into hell is still descending into hearts, still stepping into the darkest corners of shame, regret, and fear, not to condemn, but to redeem. You cannot fall deeper than the love that has already gone below you. The cross was where love paid the price. The descent was where love claimed the victory. The resurrection was where love gave it back to us. And now every sunrise, every forgiven soul, every whispered prayer of faith is proof that the descent was worth it. So when you wonder where God is in your silence, when your prayers seem unanswered and your world feels buried, remember this: he's been to the grave before, and he knows the way out. Love went deeper than death, and because of that, nothing can separate you from him again.